again, a new season in our award-winning series of Let's Talk podcast, presented to you by the Hazel and Betty Ford Foundation. I'm your host, William C. Moyers. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. Our topic today, overcoming addiction in a time of racism. Our guest, Peter Hayden. I've known Peter since I first went to work at Hazel in 1996. And everyone said, William, you need to meet and you need to listen to what Peter Hayden has to say. And I think it's fair to say that I've been listening ever since, but not just listening, but learning, and along the way admiring what Peter has done for people in recovery, particularly people of color. He is the founder, the president, and the CEO of Turning Point, based in Minnesota. Peter, welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Hi, William C. Moyers. How are you?
I'm doing okay, thanks. Tell me, Peter, 1973, why does that year resonate with you?
That's the time I changed my life. I was, just a quick story. I left the friend's house. We had been doing cocaine. Driving home, I ran into a car in front of the police station. I'm gonna show you how God works. I ran the car in front of the police station. Police just came out. They saw I was drunk and they took me inside of their building. From there, I have been sober ever since. I went to a place called Meadowbrook Treatment Center. A forensic psychologist told me, said, you know, if you follow this program, your life will never be the same. And William, my life has never been the same.
What was it like, Peter, growing up in the 1960s as an African-American man in the Twin Cities, and as somebody who was addicted, who presumably was running along a narrow path at that time?
It was interesting because I'm originally from Kansas City, Missouri, and at the time I was going to school, schools were named after Black people. It was around the time of Topeka versus the Board of Education. So I knew my history. I went to a school called W.W. Yates. My friend went to a school called Banneker. So all these schools were named after people who looked like me. When I came here to Minnesota, there were Grants and Lincolns and all these people who I knew nothing about. And it was interesting that the environment in which you come up in makes your life different. And so I just thought that Black people lived over north Minneapolis and you were tied down there. You didn't go downtown. And I'm talking about Minnesota, and it sounds like I'm talking about Mississippi. But in the 60s, that's what it was. And I graduated from De La Salle Military Academy in Kansas City and come here and see some different things happening that I just didn't understand.
What did you become aware of first? Racism in your life or substances and their impact in your life?
I understood racism first because I come from a racist area, Missouri. If you from St. Louis, it's Missouri. If you're from Kansas City, it's Missouri, you know? And so I understood all of that, but nothing stopped me from getting a good education going forward. When I came here, it was silent. It creeped up on you and you kind of said, what is going on? Because all I wanted to know, get the information of where I was at and things like that. So what happened, William, was that I used drugs and alcohol to fend off many of the issues that I were dealing with. And I didn't understand drugs and alcohol. I thought it was just what people did.
So when did you finally decide or become aware of the fact that you had a problem? Was it when you had that accident in front of the police station, or were you aware of that before?
It's when not before the accident, it was when I went into the service, into the United States Army to serve the people of this great country, the United States, and found out that there was separation between what I had to do in terms of serving and what others had to do. The interesting piece was liquor was very cheap. When I was in the service, it was like 29 cents a shot. And you had a lot of it. And I was in Korea and Vietnam. And so the more stress you had, it was not about treatment. It was about get you something to alleviate the stress.
And then you grew up, you came home from Vietnam, you're hanging around. When you found treatment, what was that experience like for you?
It was unbelievable. It was the best thing that ever happened to me, William, simply because there were people who understood my treatment issues versus my color issues. And so for 7 years of my sobriety, I didn't have to worry about issues of what people felt about me as much as what others saw in me in the recovery system. It was a family.
You found recovery in 1973, and just a few years later, you're going from being an addict and an alcoholic and going to treatment to starting a treatment center. How did that happen?
You know, that was really interesting because everything that I said about treatment, I want you and your public to know I meant that. However, as an African-American man, I started to see some things that by going through treatment, my friends started to change. My friends started to look like you. Their color was your color. I started to see that if I wasn't within that mix, I didn't do well and things of this nature. And fortunately, I figured out that if this was happening to me, it must be happening to others. And so I didn't want to be selfish and said, I've made it. I pulled myself up by my bootstraps and everything is good. And so I said, with a man named Henry Sullivan, I said, we should do something about this. And in talking, I started to meet with icons like Harry Davis Jr., Richard Green, many people like that, Earl Craig, those kinds of people. And I said, what can we do to have a program like Meadowbrook? Because Meadowbrook was a lot like Hazelden and Betty Ford. And we started to work on it. And that's how we started. So I must say this, William, nothing I have done has been because of my intellect. It's all been because taking it a step at a time.
And of course, you've talked very openly about the fact that your program of recovery is the 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Do you find that the 12 steps are applicable regardless of your skin color?
Yeah, you know, and what we also did, I will never leave the 12 steps, but we also added in the 7 steps of Kwanzaa because it was a cultural thing. And so I would say to people, never abandon the 12 steps, but you can also culturally look at how you grew up, who you are, and things of this nature. And because 12 steps is so great that it fits into the 12 steps. And that's the beauty of 12 steps.
And Peter, what about the role of spirituality or faith, specifically church, in the African American community and in the community of recovery?
That is our foundation. The church has always been. Now, it's a little different now, and we're going to have to figure that out because younger and younger kids don't know anything about church. And church is the foundation of who and what you do. I would never, ever, because you've got to know a higher power. You've got to have a God. You must have something to lay on or stand on. Otherwise, you can't make it. And that's what the 12 steps does. It gives you a foundation, and then you find out your foundation that allows you to stand on. And in the Black community or African American community, you find that church is the thing. It's the way to go.
Peter, you've been in recovery a long, long time, 1973, and certainly you've had a lot of highs during that time, but you've had some lows as well. What's been the toughest part of your journey?
Ooh, now that's a tough one, man. But I had a daughter. I have a daughter, I said that way. Her name was Taylor Simone Hayden. Taylor did everything along with my other two kids, and along with Jeff Hayden, who was a senator up here. Taylor did what was right. She wanted to go to a HBCU. She picked out to Prairie View. She went to Prairie View, was a great student, and graduated from Prairie View in 2014, decided to move to Houston, Texas, where her grandparents lived and her uncles, was doing a great job in the internship with Enterprise rental car. She was on her way, and so she and some girls decided to take a vacation, a weekend vacation to Atlanta, Georgia, and went there, and things were going well. She went to a supper club in Buckhead, not the bucket of blood, but in Buckhead. Gets there, things are going well. She goes out to see if the Uber's on his way. Some guys across the street are arguing around drugs and gang banging and things of this nature. And so before she could get back in the club, they start shooting at each other. And out of 100 people, she was the one that got hit by the bullet. And that was, I'm telling you, if I hadn't had AA, I know I would be in jail or back using, but I took it a step at a time. My family takes it one step at a time. And we know that God does nothing wrong or bad. And so we have the Taylor Hayden Fund for her. And that's what we're working on. We're working with young ladies who are young and trying to give them an opportunity, because nothing she did was wrong. So it's not like you can't do this, you shouldn't do that. It's just the fact life is only in one person's hand, and in my belief is God.
So Peter, you turned the adversity of your daughter's murder into the opportunity to help other people. The other thing that I know has been a big challenge that you've turned into an opportunity has been what happened in the Twin Cities in the summer of 2020, this past summer, with the murder of George Floyd and the racial strife. Tell me how all of that has impacted your own perspective and your journey.
Well, yeah, it's I could have been George Floyd. You could have been George Floyd, but more so I could have, because I was crazy. As my son talks about all the time, State Senator Hayden, he talks about, if the way the world is today in Minnesota is today, if I had been going through if I had been out there in the streets, just put it that way, I had more of a chance being George Floyd than Peter Hayden, who you're talking to now. And that's because I was crazy. But at least there were people like Hayden and Betty Ford, and you in particular, that gave me an opportunity to change my life. So our acronym for a turning point is a time and a place to change your mind. And that's what we're trying to do. You don't gonna see me on TV a lot or whatever the case is, but you're going to hear about Turning Point. And that's why I'm on your show, and I want to be on other people's show to say, you don't always have to be talkative as much as your action speaks louder than your words.
Amen. Thanks, Peter Hayden. You are an inspiration to thousands of people, me among them.
Let me say this. My family, I have a son, in other words, I'm alcoholic, but my son never had to do that because he was a state senator. My daughter, Taylor, graduated from Prairie View A&M. My daughter, Sydney, graduated from the University of Missouri and is a grade school teacher. And then my daughter, Erin Nicole, works for Target, and she graduated from Mississippi State. And I couldn't do that without the program and certainly without my wife.
Thank you for sharing your family and your recovery with us today. Peter Hayden. Please join us for another edition of Let's Talk, and make sure to tell your family and friends, colleagues, and fellow travelers to check out our podcast too. On behalf of our executive producer, Lisa Stangl, and the crew at Blue Moon Productions, we want to urge you to remember, together we are building a healthier, wholesome, and happier tomorrow, one day, one life, one family, and one community at a time. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay the course.